David Foster Wallace, The Infinite Jest. Year of the Dependent Adult Undergarment, 6 November. Both Pat Montesians and Gately's AA sponsor like to remind Gately how this new resident, Geoffrey Day, could end up being an invaluable teacher of patience and tolerance for him, Gately, as Ennet House staff. So then at 46 years of age I came here to live by cliches, is what Day says to Charlotte Treat right after Randy Lenz asked what time it was again, at 08:25. To turn my will and life over to the care of cliches, one day at a time. Easy does it. First things first. Courage is fear that has said its prayers. Ask for help. Thy will not mine be done. It works if you work it. Grow or go. Keep coming back. Poor old Charlotte Treat, needle pointing primely beside him on the old vinyl couch that just came from Goodwill, purses her lips. You need to ask for some gratitude. Oh no, but the point is I've been already fortunate enough to receive gratitude. Day crosses one leg over the other in a way that inclines his whole little soft body toward her. For which, believe me, I'm grateful. I cultivate gratitude. That's part of the system of cliches I'm here to live by. An attitude of gratitude. A grateful drunk will never drink. I know the actual cliche is, a grateful heart will never drink. But since organs can't decline to live by utter non sequiturs as opposed to good old cliches, I'm taking the liberty of light amendment. He gives this a look like butter wouldn't melt. I'll write grateful amendment, of course. Charlotte Treat looks over to Gately for some sort of help or staff enforcement of dogma. The poor bitch is clueless. All of them are clueless. Still, Gately reminds himself that he too is probably mostly still clueless. Still, even after all these hundreds of days. I didn't know that I didn't know is another of the slogans that looks so shallow for a while and then all of a sudden drops off and deepens like the lobster waters off the North Shore. As Gately fidgets his way through the daily AM meditation, he always tries to remind himself, daily, that this is all Ennet House residency is supposed to do. Buy these poor yutzes some time, some thin pie slice of abstinent time, till they can start to get a whiff of what's true and deep, almost magic, under the shallow surface of what they're trying to do. I cultivate assiduously. I do special gratitude exercises at night up there in the room. Gratitude ups, you'd call them. Ask Randy over there if I don't do them like clockwork, diligently, sedulously. Well, it's true and all, Treat sniffs, about gratitude. Everybody else except Gately, lying on the old leather couch opposite to them, is ignoring this exchange, watching an old interlaced cartridge whose tracking is a little messed up, so that staticky straps eat at the screen's picture bottom and top. Day's not done talking. Pat M encourages newer staff to think of residents they'd like to bludgeon to death as valuable teachers of patience, tolerance, self-discipline, restraint. Day's not done talking. One of the exercises is being grateful that life is so much easier now. I used to think in long compound sentences with subordinate clauses, and even the odd polysyllable. Now I find I needn't. I live by the dictates of macrame samplers ordered from the back page of an old Reader's Digest Saturday Evening Post. Easy does it. Remember to remember. But for the grace of capital G God, turn it over. Terse, hard-boiled, monosyllabic, good old Norman Rockwell Paul Harvey wisdom. I walk around with my arms out straight in front of me and recite these cliches in a monotone, no inflection necessary. Could that be done? Could that be added to the cliche pool? No inflection necessary. Too many syllables, probably. Randy Lenz says, I ain't got time for this shit. Poor old Charlotte Treat, all 9 weeks clean, is trying to look primer and primer. She looks over again to Gately, lying on his back, taking up the living room's whole other sofa. One sneaker up on the sofa's square, frayed fabric arm thing, his eyes almost closed. Only staff get to lie on the couches. The Nile, Charlotte finally says, is not a river in Egypt. How about the both of you shut the fuck up, says Emil Minty. Joffrey, not Joff, Joffrey Day, has been at Ennet House 6 days. He came from Roxbury's infamous Daimok detox, where he was the only white person, which Gately bets must have been broadening for him. Day has a squished, blank, smeared flat face, one requiring great self-effort to and eyes that are just staring to lose the nictated glaze of early sobriety. Day's a newcomer and a wreck, a red wine and quaalude man who finally nodded out in late October and put his sab through the window of a Malden sporting goods store, and then got out and proceeded to browse until the finest came and got him, who thought something horseshit sounding like social historicity or historical society at some junior college up the express in Medford, and came in saying on his intake he also manned the helm of a scholarly quarterly, word for word. The house manager, he said, manned the helm, and scholarly. His intake estimated that Day's been in and out of blackout for most of the last several years, and his wiring still, as they say, a bit fried. His detox at Daimok, where they barely have resources to give you Librium if you start to DT, must have been just real grim, because Joffrey D alleges it never happened. Now his story is he just strolled into Ennet House on a lark one day from his home 10 plus clicks in Malden, and he found the place too hilariously egregious to want to ever leave. It's the newcomers with some education that are the worst, according to G.N.M. They identify the whole selves with their head, and the disease makes command their headquarters in the head. Footnote number 90. E.g. selected snippets from the individual's resident informal interface hours of D.W. Gately, live-in staff, Ennet House, Drug and Alcohol Recovery House, Enfield MA, on and off, from just about the Brookline Young People's AA meeting up to about 23-29 hours, Wednesday, 11 November, YDAU. I fear simply I have to deny the insinuation that it's disloyal or ungrateful to find oneself troubled by certain quite glaring inconsistencies in this master quote-unquote program. You all seem to expect us simply to open up and blindly swallow whole, and then walk around glazed with our arms right out straight in front of us, parroting, reciting. Joffrey, man, I don't think anybody's trying to insinuate anything over on you, brother. I know I ain't trying to. No, you simply just sit there with your arms crossed, nodding, with a timeless patience that communicates condescension and judgment without exposing you to responsibility for insinuating anything aloud. Maybe when I look patient, I'm really trying to be patient with myself for not finishing school and etc. and having a hard time keeping up with you. This AA tactic of masking condescension behind humility. I guess I'm just sorry for you. You're feeling frustrated with the program today. I know there's lots of days I'm frustrated with it. So I don't know what to say helpful to you, except what they once said to me, to just hang in there. One day at a one day at a one day. Brother, that's just all I know to tell you that's worked for me. I know for me it don't matter if there's days I fucking hate it. I just have to do it. And it don't help me or anybody else if I go around negativing or newcomers and trying to take out my issues and trying to fuck them up with God puzzles. Mr. Gately, sir, I found myself sitting tonight with yet another Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, the central message of which was the importance of going to still more Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. The infuriating carrot and donkey aspect of trudging meetings, only to trudge to still more meetings. I hear you. As if, what's supposedly going to be communicated at these future meetings, I'm exhorted to trudge to that cannot simply be communicated now. at this meeting instead of the glazed recitation of exhortations to attend these big future revelatory meetings. I'm doing my best to stay with you here, day man. And tonight I'm just settling in yet another uneven legged chair, cultivating that glazed, passive, spectorial state of mind that is clearly what they're trying to inspire in the Ephebi. Settling in next to a positively redolent Emil M. and trying to hold my poor, adult, denial-ridden mind open with all available main. Listening to this ravaged-looking Yali in yellow slacks detail episodes of tremens whose gruesome interdicted any possible identification. I remember I heard Pat tell you that thinking people who are walking ahead of you are following you is pretty bad kind of DTs, brother. And I informed her that there's a well-known surveillance tactic known as box surveillance, which involves certain members of the surveillance team establishing themselves in front of the subject. Except I don't even remember you explaining why a sociology teacher waving his way from his fourth bar to his fifth bar is important enough for four guys from some you never mentioned what kind of conspiracy to be pulling this real complex surveillance thing. Except I was interrupting your point. You were sharing. I know. I'm sorry. Your basic decency is why you're whom I bring my thoughts to, Don. You know that. That makes me feel good, layman. I mean, whom else might I speak? The girl who takes her eye out and fondles it? Poor Eva with the obsessive tattoo charms? Lens? It makes me feel good you think I'm decent to talk to. That's supposed to be why I'm here. I sure needed to talk at the start. Can you remember where you were headed before I interrupted? Something is broken, Ivy Leaguer said once. Some AA Sally. He said that only one newcomer in a million actually trudges in Alcoholics Anonymous closed meeting and in fact doesn't belong there. Meaning doesn't turn out to have the disease, you mean? Yes, and that he said that, quote, if you, looking right at yours truly, seemingly, which that wearily amused patient expression, you almost practice in front of the mirror, he said that only one newcomer in a million doesn't belong here. And, quote, you think you're that one in a million? You definitely belong here. And everybody howled with mirth, stomped their feet, and blew their coffee through their noses and wiped their eyes with their backs of their hands and elbowed each other, howled with mirth. But you were like unsmiling at it. And everybody labels as denial or ingratitude what's actual horror done. The horror of acknowledging that you do apparently have some sort of problem with mild sedatives and fine Chianti, and wanting with all sincerity to give every fair chance to a treatment modality which millions swear up and down has helped them with their own problem. You're talking about AA. To want very much to believe in it, and to try, and the horror when you find the program riddled with these obvious idiotic fallacies ad reducti and absurdum, which I'm going to need to ask you to try to say that again in words I can follow, Jeffrey. If you want me to be right there alongside you, and I'm sorry if this seems descending. Don, I am sincere when I say frightened. I find there are things about this allegedly miraculous program doctrine that simply do not follow, that do not cohere, that do not make anything resemble rational sense. I'm with you on that one now, brother. Tonight's example is of that one in a million, say. Don, let me ask you, Don, in all earnest, why shouldn't every human being in the world be in AA? Now I'm not with you anymore, again, Joffrey. Why doesn't every featherless biped on earth qualify for AA? By AA's reasoning, why isn't everyone everywhere an alcoholic? Well, Joffrey, man, it's a totally private decision to admit the disease. Nobody can go tell another man but indulge with me for a moment. By AA's own logic, everyone ought to be in AA. If you have some sort of substance problem, then you belong in AA. But if you say you do not have a substance problem, in other words, you deny that you have a substance problem, which by definition is denial, and thus you apparently need the denial-bursting fellowship of AA even more than someone who can admit his problem. Don't look at me like that. Show me the flaw in my reasoning, I bet you. Show me why not everyone should be in AA, given the way AA regards those who do not believe they belong here. And now you don't know what to say. There's no cockle-warming cliche that applies. The slogan I've heard that might work here is the slogan analysis paralysis. Oh, lovely. Very nice. By all means, don't think about the validity of what they're claiming your life hinges on. Oh, do not ask what it is. Do not ask whether it's not insane. Simply open wide for the spoon. For me, the slogan means there's no set way to argue intellectual type stuff about the program. Surrender to win. Give it a way to keep it. God as you understand him. You can't think of it as an intellectual thing. Trust me, because I've been there, man. You can analyze it until you're breaking tables with your forehead and find a cause to walk away back out there where the disease is. Or you can stay and hang in and do your best you can. A response to a question about its axioms then is to invoke an axiom about the inadvisability of all such questions. It ain't AA day, man. No one like individual can respond for AA. Am I out of line in seeing something totalitarian about it? Something, dare I say, un-American? To interdict a fundamental doctrinal question by invoking a doctrine against questioning? Wasn't this the very horror the Madisonians were horrified of in 1791? Amendments 1st and 9th? My grievance is disallowed because of my petition to redress is a priori interdicted by the inadvisability of all petitioning. I'm about to get fucking lapped here. I'm so not following. You honestly don't see what a little whacked out about you, what you're saying all about denial? I'm thinking your failure to engage me on the question itself means either I'm right and AA's whole belong versus denial matrix is constructed on logical sand, in which case horror, or else it means you're stupefied with condescending pity for me for some reason I fail to grasp, doubtless because of denial, in which case the look on your face right now is the same weary patience that makes me want to scream in meetings. So scream. They can't kick you out. How comforting. This is a thing I do know. They can't kick you out. End of footnote number 90. They were chinos of indeterminate hue, brown socks with black shoes, and shirts that Pat Montesian had described in the intake as Eastern European type Hawaiian shirts. Days now on the vinyl couch, the Charlotte treat after breakfast in the Ennet House living room with a few other residents that either aren't working or don't have to be at work early, and with Gately, who's pulled an all-nighter dream duty shift with the front office still over 100. And then get temp relieved by Joel Foltz, so he could go and work janitoring down at the Shattuck shelter till 0700, and then came and hauled ass back up here and took back over so that Joel could go off to her NA thing with a bunch of NA people in what looked like a Dune buggy if the dunes in question were in hell, and is now Gately trying to unclench and center himself inside by tracing the cracks in the paint of the living room ceiling with his eyes. Gately often feels a terrible sense of loss, narcotics-wise, in the AM. Still, even after this long clean. His sponsor over at the White Flag Group says some people never get over the loss of what they thought was their one true best friend and lover. They just have to pray daily for acceptance and the brass danglers to move forward through grief and loss, to wait for the time to harden the scab. The sponsor, Ferocious Francis G., doesn't give Gately an iota of shit for feeling some negative feelings about it. On the contrary, he commends Gately for his candor in breaking down and crying like a baby, telling him about it early 1 a.m. over the phone. The sense of loss. It's a myth, no one misses it. Their particular substance. Shit, you wouldn't need help if you didn't miss it. You just have to ask for help and turn it over. The loss and pain. To keep it coming. To show up. Pray. Ask for help. Gately rubs his eye. Simple advice like this does him like a lot of cliches. Day's right about how it seems. Yes. And if Joffrey Day keeps on steering by the way things seem to him, then he's a dead man for sure. Gately already watched dozens come through here and leave early and go back out there and then go to jail or die. If Day ever gets lucky and breaks down, finally, and comes in front of the office at night to scream, then he can't take it anymore and clutch at Gately's pant cuff and blubber and beg for help at any cost. Gately will tell Day the thing is that the cliched directives are a lot deeper and hard to actually do, to try and live by instead of just say. But he'll only get to say it if Day comes and asks, personally. Gately gives Joffrey D a month at the outside before his back, tipping his hat at the parking meters. Except, who is Gately, Josh, who'll end up getting the gift of the program versus who won't? He needs to remember. He tries to feel like Day's teaching him patience and tolerance. It takes great patience and tolerance not to want to punch the little soft guy out of the ravine and open his bunk to somebody that really desperately wants it. The gift. Except, who is Gately to think he can know who wants it and who doesn't, deep down? Gately's arm is behind his head, up against the sofa and the other arm. The gold DEC viewer is on something violent and color enhanced. Gately neither sees or hears. It was part of his gift as a bugler. He can sort of turn his attention on and off, like a light. Even when he was a resident here, it had this prescient housebreaker's ability to screen input, to do sensory tirage. It was with 21 other newly detoxed housebreakers, hoods, whores, fired execs, Avon ladies, subway musicians, beer-bloated construction workers, vagrants, indignant car salesmen, bulimic trauma mamas, bunko artists, mincing pillow buyers, North End hard guys, pimply guys with electric nose rings, denial-ridden housewives, and etc. Old jonesing and head gamming and mucus and grieving and basically whacked out and producing non-stopping output 24/7, 365. At some point here, they saying, so bring on the lobotomist, bring him on, I say. Except Gately's own counselor here when he was a resident, Eugenio Martinez, one of the volunteer alumni counselors, a one-eared former boiler room bunker man, and now a cellular phone retailer who'd hooked up with the house under the original founder, guy that didn't even use his first name, and had about 10 years clean. G-Nam did. Eugenio's lovingly confronted Gately early on about his special burglar selective attention and how it could be dangerous because you can be sure it's you doing the screening and not the spider. Gene called the disease the spider and talked about feeding the spider versus starving the spider and so on and so forth. Eugenio M. had called Gately into the house manager's back office and said, what if Don's screening input turned out to be feeding the old spider, and what about the experimental unscreening input for a while? Gately had said he'd do his best to try and come back about and tried to watch a spawned decent gems of the Celtics while two resident pillow biters from the Fenway were having this involved conversation about some third faggot having to go in and get the skeleton of some fucking rodent removed from inside their butthole. Footnote number 91. Pillow biters and North short term, one Gately grew up with. It and the F term are the only terms for male homosexuals he knows. Still. End of footnote number 91. The unscreening experiment had lasted half an hour. This was right before Gately got his 90-day chip. Wasn't exactly wrapped real tight or real tolerant still. And the house, this year, is nothing like the freak show it was back when Gately went through. Gately has been completely substance-free for 421 days now. Mr. Lotreat, with carefully made-up ruined face, is watching the viewer's striped shot cartridge while she needlepoints something. Conversation between her and Joffrey D has mercifully petered out. Day is scanning the room for somebody else to engage and piss off so he can prove to himself that he doesn't fit in here and stay separated off, insulated inside him, and maybe he get them so pissed off there's a beef and he gets bounced down. Day, and it won't be his fault. You can almost hear his disease chewing away in his head, feeding. Emil Minty, Randy Lentz, and Bruce Green are also in the room, sprawled in spring-shot chairs, lighting one gasper off the end of the last. Their postures the "don't fuck with me" slouch of the streets that makes their body's texture somehow hard to distinguish from the rest of the chairs. Nell Gunther is sitting at the long table in the doorless dining room that opens right off the old DEC fold-out TP's pine stand, whitening under her nails with a manicure pencil amid the remains of something else she'd eaten that involved serious syrup. Bert F. Smith is also there, weighed down by himself at the table's far end, trying to saw at a waffle with a knife and a fork attached to the stumps of his wrist with Velcro bands. A long time ago, former DMB, driver's license examiner, Bert F. Smith is 45 and looks 70, has almost all white hair that's waxy and yellow from close order smoke, and finally got into Ennet House last month after 9 months stuck in Cambridge City shelter. Bert F. Smith's stories he's making is like 50th odd stab at sobriety in AA. Once devotedly RC, Bert FS has potentially lethal problem with falling in a loving God ever since the RC. Church apparently granted his wife an annulment like the BS 99 after 15 years of marriage. Then for several years, a roaming house drunk, which on Gately's view is about like one step up from homelessness person type drunk, Bert FS got mugged and beaten half to death in Cambridge over Christmas Eve last year, and then left to like freeze in there, in an alley, in a storm, and ended up losing his hands and feet. Dooney Glean's been observed telling Bert FS things like that there's some new guy coming to the disabled room of Pat's office with Bert FS, who not without only hands and feet, but arms and legs and even a head, who communicates by farting in Morse code. This Sally earned Glenn 3 days full house restriction and a week's extra of chore for what Gillette folks describe in the log as excessive cruelty. There's a vague intestinal moaning in Gately's right side, watching Bert FS smoke a Benson Hedges by holding it between his stumps with his elbows out, like a guy with pruning shears. It's an adventure in fucking pathos as far as Gately's concerned, and Joffrey Day cracks wise about it, about there but be grace, and forget about what it's like to try Bert FS try and light a match. Gately, who's been on live-in here staff for 4 months, believes Charlotte treats devotion to needlepoint is suspect. All those needles in and out of all the thin, sterile white cotton stretching drum right around his round frame. Then the needle makes a kind of thud and squeak when it goes in the claw. It's not so much like the soundless pop and slide of a real cook and shoot, but still, she takes such great care. Gately wonders what color he'd call the ceiling if forced to call it a color. It's not white and it's not gray. The brown-yellow tones from high tar gaspers. A paw hangs up near the ceiling, even this early in a new sober day. Some of the drunks and track jockeys stay up most night, juggling their feet and chain smoking, even though there's no cartridges or music allowed after hours. He has that odd house staffer knack, Gately, already after 4 months of seeing everything in both living and dining rooms without really looking. Emil Minty, a kind of hardcore smack addict punk here for reasons nobody can quite yet pin down, is an old mustard colory-eyed chair with his combat boots up on one of standing ashtrays. which is tilting, not quite enough for Gately to tell him watch out, please. Minty's orange mohawk and the shaped skull rounding are starting to grow out brown, which is just not a pleasant sight in the morning at all. The other ashtray on the floor by his chair is full of the ragged little new moons of bitten nails, which has got to mean that the Hester tea that he'd ordered to bed at 230 was right back down in the chair and still going at her nails again. The second Gately left to mop shit at the shelter. When he's up all night, Gately's stomach gets all tight and acidy from either all the coffee or maybe just staying up. Minty's been on the streets since she was like 16. Gately can tell. She's got that snooty complexion homeless guys get, where the soot has insinuated itself into the dermal layer and thickened, making Minty look somehow upholstered. And the big-armed driver from Leisure Time Eyes, the quiet kid, green, a garbage-head, all-type substance kid, maybe 21, face very slightly smudged on one side, wore sleeveless khaki shirts, and had a liver in a trailer in that apocalyptic Enfield trailer park out near the Alston Spur. Gately likes green because he seems to have a sense enough to keep his map shut while he's got nothing important to say, which is basically all the time. The tattooed on the kid's right tricep is a spear-pierced heart with the hideous name Mildred Bonk, who Bruce G told him was a ray of living light and a dead ringer for the late singer of The Fiends in Human Shape, and his dead heart's one love ever, and who took their daughter and left him this summer for some guy that told her he ranched fucking longhorn cows east of Atlantic City, New Jersey. He's got, even by Ennet House standards, major league sleep trouble. Green. And he and Gately played cribbage sometimes in the wee dead hours, a game Gately picked up in jail. Bert F.S. is now hunched in a meaty coughing fit, his elbows out of his forehead purple. No sign of Hester Thoral, nail biter, and something Pat calls borderline. Gately can see everything without moving, or moving his head or either eye. Also in here is Randy Lenz, who, Lenz, is a small-time organic coke dealer who wears sport coats rolled over his parlor-tanned forearms and is always checking his purse on the inside of his wrists. It's come out that Lenz is of keen interest to both sides of the law, because this past May he'd apparently all of a sudden lost control and holed up all of a sudden in a Charlestown motel and freebased most of a whole 100 grams he'd been fronted by suspiciously trusting Brazilian in what Lenz didn't know was supposed to have been a DEA sting operation in the South End. Having screwed both sides in what Gately's secret views as a delicious fuck-up, Randy Lenz has, since May, been the most wanted he's probably ever been. He's seedily handsome in the way pimps and low-level coke dealers, muscular in the MP-ish way that certain guys' muscles look muscular but can't really lift anything with complexly gelled hair, and the little bird-like head movements of the deeply vain. One forearm's hair has a little hairless patch, which Gately knows well spells knife owner. And if there's one thing Gately's never been able to stomach, is a knife owner. Little swaggery guys that always queer a square beef and come up the ground with a knife where you have to get cut to take it away from them. Lenz is watching Gately reserved politeness to people you pretty much want to beat up on sight. It's pretty obvious to everybody except Pat Montishan, whose odd gullibility in the presence of human sludge, though Gately needs to try and remember, had been one of the reasons why he himself had gotten to Ennet House initially. Originally, obvious is that Lenz is here mostly just a hideout. He rarely leaves the house except under compulsion, avoids windows, and travels to the nightly required AA/NA meetings in a disguise that makes him look like Cesar Romero after a terrible accident. And then he always wants to walk back to the house solo afterwards, which is not encouraged. Lance is seated in the northeasternmost corner of an old fake velour love seat. He's jammed in the northernmost corner of the living room. Randy Lynch has a strange, compulsive need to be the north of everything, and possibly even northeast of everything, and Gately has no clue what it is about, but observes Lance's position routinely for his own interest and files. Lance's leg, like Ken Etterdy's leg, never stops juggling. Day claims it juggles worse in its sleep. Another gurgle and abdominal chug from Don G, laying there. Charlotte Treat has violent red hair, as in the hair colors of like a red crayon. The reason she doesn't have to work an outside menial job is she's got some strain of the virus, or like HIV. Former prostitute, reformed. Why do prostitutes, when they get straight, always try to get so prim? It's like the long repressed librarian ambitions come floating out. Charlotte T has a cut-rate horse, hard half pretty face. Her eyes lassoed with shadow all around her four eyelids. Her also with a case of dermal layer sooty complexion. The riveting thing about Treat is how her cheeks are deeply pitted in the deep trenches that she packs with foundation and tries to cover over with blush, which along with the hair gives her the look of a mean clown. The ghastly wounds in her cheek look for all the world like somebody got at her with a wood-burning kit at some point in her career path. Gately would rather not know. Don Gately's almost 29 and sober and just huge, lying there, gurgling and inert, with a fluttery eye smile, one shoulder blade and buttock pooch out over the side thing of the sofa that hangs like a hammock. Gately looks less built than poured, the smooth immobility of an Easter Island statue. It would be nice if intimidating size wasn't one of the major factors in male alumni getting the male live-in staff job here. But there you go. Donji has a massive square head, square looking by the Prince Valiantash haircut he tries to maintain himself in the mirror to save money. Room and board aside, plus the opportunity to serve, he makes very little of an Ennet House staffer, and is paying off restitution schedules in 3 different district courts. He has a fluttery wide-eyed smile now of someone who's holding himself over the level of those. Pat Montesian is due in at 0900, and Donji can't go to bed until she arrives because the house manager has driven Jenny Belbin to a court appearance downtown, and he's the only staffer here. Foltz, the female live-in staffer, is at the Narcotics Anonymous convention in Hartford for the long Interdependence Day weekend. Gately personally is not hot on NA, so many relapses and unhumble returns, so many war stories told with none-disguised bullshit pride, so little emphasis on service or serious message. All these people in leather and mental peering rooms full of Randy Lentz, all hugging each other, pretending they don't miss the substance. Rampant newcomer fucking. There's a difference between abstinence versus recovery. Gately knows. Except, of course, who's Gately to judge who works for who? He just knows what seems like it works for him today. AA stuff and feel bright and love. The White Flag Group. Old guys with suspenders bellies and white cruise cuts. And geologic amounts of sober time. The crocodiles that'll take your big square head off if they sense you're getting complacent or chasing tail, or forgetting that your life still hangs on the balance every fucking day. White Flag newcomers so crazed and sick they can't sit and have peace, and have to pace at the meeting's rear, like Gately when he first came. Retired old kindergarten teachers in polyresin slags and pince nez, who bake cookies for the weekend meetings and relate from behind the podium how they used to blow bartenders at closing for just 2 more fingers into the paper cup to take some against the morning's needle light. Gately, albeit an oral narcotics man from way back, has committed himself to AA. He drank his fair share too, he figures, after all. Executive Director Pat M. is due at 0900 and has application interviews with 3 people, 2F and 1M, who better be showing up soon. And Gately will answer the door when they don't know enough just to come in and will and say welcome and get a cup of coffee, if he judges them able to hold it. He'll get them aside and tip them off to be sure that to pet Pat M dogs during the interview. They'll be sprawled all over the front office, sides heaving, writhing and biting themselves. He'll tell them it's a proved fact that if Pat's dogs like you, you're in. Pat M has directed Gately to tell appliers this, and then, if the appliers do actually pet the dogs, 2 hideous golden retrievers with pearling scabs and skin afflictions, plus the one has grand mal epilepsy. It'll betray a level of desperate willingness that Pat says is just about all she goes by, deciding. A nameless cat oozes by the broad window sill above the back of a fabric couch. Animals here come and go. Alumni adopt them, or they just disappear. Their fleas remain. Gately's intestines moan. Boston's dawn coming back from on the Green Line morning was just chemically pink trails of industrial exhaust blowing due north. The nail parings in the ashtray of the floor, he realizes now, too big from fingernails. These bitten arcs are broad and thick and deep autumn yellow. He swallows hard. He tells Joffrey Day, even if they're just cliches. Cliches are A, soothing, and B, remind you of common sense, and C, license the universal assent that drowns out silence. 4, silence is deadly, pure spider food, if you got the disease. Gina M says you can spell disease, dis-ease, which basically sums the basic situation up nicely. Pat has meeting at the Division of Substance Abuse Services Government Center at noon. She needs to be reminded about. She can't read her own handwriting, which the stroke affected her handwriting. Gately ambitions going around having to find out who's biting their fucking toenails in the living room and putting the disgusting toenail bits in the ashtray at like 0500. Plus house regs prohibit bare feet any place downstairs. There's a pale brown water stain sign on the ceiling over day and treat the almost exact shape of Florida. Randy Lance has issues with Joffrey Day because Day is a glib and a teacher and a scholarly journal's helm. This threatens the self-concept of Randy Lance that thinks of himself as kind of a hipply sexy artist, intellectual. Small-time dealers never conceptualize themselves as just small-time dealers, kind of like whores never do. For occupation of their intake from Lance had to put freelance scriptwriter, and he makes a show of that he reads. For the first week here in July, he held the books upside down in the northeast corner of whatever room. He had a gigantic medical dictionary he'd haul up and down and smoke and read until Annie Parrott, the assistant manager, had to tell him not to bring it down anymore because it was fucking with Morris Henley's mind. At which juncture, he quit reading and started talking, making everybody nostalgic from where he just sat there and read. Joffrey D has issues with Randy L. Also, you can tell there's a certain way they don't quite look at each other. And so now, of course, they're mashed together in the 3-man together since 3 guys in one night missed curfew and came in without one normal-sized pupil between them and refused urines and got bounced on the spot, and so Day gets moved up in his feet from the 5-man to the 3-man. Seniority comes quick around here. Pat Minty, down at the dining room table end. Bert FS, still coughing, still hunched over, on his face duskly purple. And Nell G behind him pounding him on the back so it keeps sending him forward over his little ashtray. And he's waving up one stump vaguely over his shoulder, trying to signal her to quit. Lance and Day, and beef may be brewing. They'll try to goad lands into a fight that'll be public enough so he doesn't get hurt but does get bounced, and then he can leave treatment and go back to Chianti and Loodles and getting assaulted by sidewalks and making out like the relapse is Ennet House's fault and never had to confront himself for the disease. To Gately, Day is like an open-wide interactive textbook on the disease. One of Gately's jobs is to keep an eye on what's possibly brewing among residents and let Pat or the manager know and try to smooth things down in advance if possible. The ceiling's color could be called done if forced. Someone has farted. Nobody knows just who. But this isn't like a normal auto place where everybody coolly pretends a fart didn't happen. Here, everybody has to make their little comment. Time is passing. Ennet House of reeks of passing time. It is the humidity of early sobriety, hanging and palpable. You can hear ticking clockless rooms here. Gately changes the angle of one sneaker, puts the other arm behind his head. His head has real weight and pressure. Randy lands obsessive compulsions include the need to be north, a fear of discs, a tendency to consistently take his own pulse, a fear of all forms of timepieces, and a need to always know the time with exact precision. Day man, you got the time maybe real quick? Lands for the third time in half an hour. Patience, tolerance, compassion, self-discipline, restraint. Gately remembers his first 6 months here straight. He felt the sharp edge of every second that went by. And freak show dreams. Nightmares beyond the worst DTs you'd ever heard about. Our reason for the night shift staffer in the front office is so somebody's there for all residents to talk to at when, not if, when the freak show dreams ratchet them out of bed at like 0300. Nightmares about relapsing and getting high, not getting high but having everybody think you're high, getting high with your alcoholic mom and then killing her with a baseball bat, whipping the old unit out for a spot urine and starting up and flames come shooting out, getting high and bursting into flames. A beagle explodes in an enhanced bloom of sooty flame on the DEC viewer. It's hood up like an old pop tab. Day's making a broad gesture, checking his watch. Right around 8:30, fella. Randy L's fine nostrils flare and widen. He stares straight ahead, eyes narrowed, fingers on his wrists. Day purses his lips like jogging. Gately hangs on his head over the arm of the sofa and regards the lens upside down. That look on your map there means something, Randy? Are you like communicating something with that look? Does anybody maybe know the time a little more exactly, is what I'm wondering. Done, since they doesn't. Gately checks his own cheap digital, head still hung over the sofa's arm. I got 032, 14, 15, 16, Randy. Okay, thanks a lot, DG man. So that Day has the same flared up, narrow look for lens. We've been over this, friend, amigo, sport. You do this with me all the time. Again, I'll say, I don't have a digital watch. This is a fine old antique watch. I'll point, a memento of far better days. It's not a digital watch. It's not a Celsius-based atomic clock. It points with hands. See? Spiro Agnew knew. Here was two little arms. They point, they suggest it's not a sodding stopwatch for life. Let's get a watch, am I right? Why don't you just get a watch, Lance? 3 people I happen to know for a fact have offered you to get you a watch. And you can pay them back whenever you feel comfortable about poking your nose out or investigating the world. Get a watch, obtain a watch, a fine, incredible, wide watch. About 5 times the width of your wrist, so you have to hold like a falconer, and it treats up time like PI. Easy does it, Charlotte treats half sings, not looking up from her needle and frame. Day looks at her. I don't believe I was speaking to you in any way, shape, or form. Len stares at him. You're trying to fuck with me, brother. He shakes his fine, shiny head. Big mistake. Ooh, I'm all a tremble. I can barely hold my arm steady to read my watch. Big, real big mistake. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men, says Gately. back on his back, smiling at the dunk-cracked ceiling. He's the one who farted.